Hi, I'm Robert Purcell, and I'm an instructor at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. And I'm going to have a class today that is brought to you by the Good Samaritan Society, Southwest Minnesota State University, and Minnesota Community and Technical College, Minnesota West Community and Technical College. Today I'm going to teach the class the causes and effects of the 90s embargo on the Republic of Haiti. I'm going to give it in a 5-segment process. The first one, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself that allows you to have a feeling that I'm qualified to give you this class. The second phase will be the effects, or the second phase will be the causes that why the embargo was implemented on the Republic of Haiti. The third one will be the effects that this embargo had after it was lifted from Haiti. And the fourth aspect will be I've made a movie that I filmed and edited while I was in Haiti of a day in the life of Haitians. And the fifth aspect will be I will do a conclusion of this class and tie it all together when it's done. So I would like to get started here, and I'll tell you a little bit about myself. From May of 1992 through April of 1996, I was in the United States Army as a combat medic. And I was stationed at 2 different places. The one place I was stationed at first was Fort Myer, Virginia, which is the home of the Old Guard and Arlington Cemetery in Washington, outside of Washington, D.C. The second place I was stationed was Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is the home of the 27th Airborne Engineers, which is the only one in the world, an engineer battalion that's airborne. The other people that are basically at that fort are the 82nd Airborne and Special Forces Operations. So it was during this time in June of '95 that I received orders. I was a sergeant at that time, and I received orders to report to Haiti. And my orders were I was going to be the non-commissioned officer in charge of the health clinic for general headquarters of the UN in Port O Prince, Haiti. And those are basically, during that time, I was in charge, when I went to Haiti, I was in charge of a health clinic, which in the Army and the UN, usually they're called aid stations. And it was a aid station that was consistent of equipment and supplies worth about $10 million. And I was also in charge of taking care of the civilian Haitian workforce that worked for the UN at the general headquarters, and also military members of 16 countries and different nationalities that also worked at the general headquarters. I also delivered supplies to the Haitian medical people that was around Port O Prince, which was the hospital. It was out in different islands. I would have to take Chinook helicopters and drop stuff out there, different military things. So what it allowed me to do, I had the freedom to go around Haiti and meet the Haitian people, meet people in different parts of the country. But this class is basically going to be the effects of the mass population of Port O Prince, Haiti, which is the capital of Port O Prince. So let's get started with class, okay? Kishan Oye Jodea. That is Creole for how are you doing today? Are you feeling okay today? It's roughly like that. Depends on how you pronunciate different parts of it. I had that opportunity to learn how to speak Creole through some of the people that worked at the UN headquarters that were Haitians that also knew English. And I took that opportunity to learn because I had to ask people that were injured how they felt or if they did, what was wrong with them. And it was an important part of my learning process while I was there. Now, how did we get involved in this? Well, I'll tell you. The world wanted to create a better environment in the Republic of Haiti. And the past presidents of Haiti basically kept their population uneducated so they could tell them what to do and when to do it, and basically lie to them and control them. And they could skim off the money of anybody that gave anything, skim off the money of the treasuries, And the world wanted to get rid of that type of democracy or lack of democracy. So the UN came in and they set up a free election and monitored it. And we had Haiti, which you can see is an island country. It is on the island of Dominica. It's shared with the Dominican Republic, but the Dominican Republic is a vastly tourist state that's not great off, but it's well off, and Haiti is a slum. It is not well off at all. It probably has never been, and anyhow, in Port O Prince, which is located in the southern part of the country, is roughly 2.5 million people of the 8 million people that live in Haiti in 1995 when I was there. So you can tell by that they wanted to have free elections. And because of the free elections, the free elections, they elected President Aristide to the country's presidential in these free elections. And he was inaugurated in February of 1991. But by September of 91, the military leaders from the old regime decided that they didn't want to lose their power. They didn't want to lose the aspect of them skimming off their money and their drug trade and everything else. So because of that, the main leader of this military junta was Raul Saradasa, and basically they didn't catch Juan Aristide, and he took off out of the country and ended up in Washington, D.C., where he became exiled into that country. Well, at that time, we decided, our president, our 41st president of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, decided that he wanted democracy to take place in this country. It was too close to the United States, and with the help of the UN, they put in trade sanctions on the Republic of Haiti, hoping that that would allow Aristide to come back to the country and take over, and the military generals to not be part of that government. But as things went on, they weren't willing to let Aristide back into the country. What happened was it became worse. They allowed drug cartels into the country. They set up their own little death squads in Haiti, and they had mass executions. I had a Haitian worker that was working for me at the time, and I was taking him on calls because he had to interpret for me. And just as we were driving, I asked him, how are things now? Because when we got into the country, the economy went up in price. Everything got more expensive for the common Haitian people. And he goes, you know, I really don't like the expense because I don't have the money, but I love my life a lot better. And I asked him why. And he says, because I can talk to a friend on a street corner. And I don't have to worry about at the end of the night if I'm going to get pulled out of my house and never show up again to my family. So that aspect with the death squads was an important thing. And as you can see, they were masked. They would beat people up. They would kill people. They would actually, when they weren't masked, they'd take notes in notebooks. And it just got terrible in that country. And because of that terrible aspect of things, I'm sure everybody can remember when they talked about the Haitian boat people. And the Haitian boat people was a mass exodus of people that knew life could be better somewhere else. And they knew the United States always had that. The missionaries told them how much life was great in the United States, how much better they could have their life. And they mass exodus. It didn't matter to them if they drowned, because they could have been raped, they could have been shot, they could have been killed. So it didn't matter. Life would be better on a boat, taking a chance to get something better than versus living in this country at the time. So the military, they just ruled ruthlessly, and killed people and impoverished them, made them work and never paid them. And so in 1994, the UN was really sick of it. They knew what was going on. They knew that there was war crimes going on in the country, and so they even implemented higher embargo. And that what they did was freeze all the assets of all the generals and the main people that were involved in the junta around the world. They froze all the Haitian assets. And at that time, we had a different president. And it was our 42nd president of the United States, Bill Clinton. And he basically got together with the generals and said, hey, we'll pay you $1 million if you leave the country and allow Aristide to come back in. And they thought they had an agreement and in 1994, and they thought they had it, and the generals backed out of this agreement. And when the generals backed out of it, Bill Clinton kind of got upset because he thought everything was in place. He was telling all his political people that it was in place. He was telling everybody around the world that it was in place, and it didn't happen. So he told the generals that if he was bringing in the military in 1994, and in 1994, William Clinton had the 82nd Airborne, 27th Engineer Group, and Special Forces Operations set to take Haiti back. And a little bit of a goof-up happened. The 82nd Airborne was supposed to go in, just for your little information. 82nd Airborne was supposed to be the first ones in, but it just happened that they had some plane difficulty, and the 27th Engineer Battalion, Airborne Engineer Battalion, dropped in all their equipment and secured the airport, main national airport of Haiti in Port O Prince, and then the rest of the groups came in. And after that time, then the Marines landed through ships and different things like that and took over. But the military junta really did take Clinton serious about the military invasion, and they had left probably within 2 hours before it happened, and there was not a shot fired, so there was no deaths of Americans or anything like that, and it allowed us to go in peacefully, and then it allowed the UN to come in peacefully to this. So the causes, basically they had free elections. They had a military coup. Those that in the world that wanted a peaceful nation that let people live and have freedom forced the issue, and in 1994, Bill Clinton made sure it was over, and then the UN came in, and then in 1995, I came into, in June of 95, I was ordered to come in and take over the aid station of Haiti. And that aspect, and when I flew into country, I flew in and I stepped off the plane, the plane on the national airport. It was a military plane. And I had a sergeant waiting for me with a big smile on his face saying, "Are you Sergeant Purcell?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "You're my replacement." And he had a smile. I mean, I could not believe the smile he had on his face. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm your replacement. Well, I get to go home." And I just thought it was a get-to-go-home thing. And we got in the ambulance, and he took me up to the Ibo Lele Motel on top of Mount Tanwa. And that was a suburb of Port O Prince, Haiti, but it was a mountain hotel that overlooked the Caribbean Sea and the whole city of Port O Prince. So it was a really nice place. It looked like a nice place anyhow, I thought. But on the way up to the hotel, I see all these hills, 8 to 12 feet high, of dirt on every street, lining from one corner to the next corner. And I asked him at that time, I go, "Why is all this dirt on these streets?" And he said, "You know what, when we go back down tomorrow morning, I'll slow down and I'll explain it to you. Right now, I'm just going to get you to the hotel so you can relax." So the next morning when I was taking him back to the airport so he could fly out, we slowed down. And then I realized Haiti wasn't that nice a place. At that time, it was hills of garbage. And not only hills of garbage, he'd slow down at certain points and you could see rats going in and out of this garbage. And he'd slow down at other points where rats were going in and out of this garbage. People were defecating in the garbage, and they were also having food markets right next to the garbage. And you'll see that in the slide when you have this movie later. You're going to see garbage to start off with. And then you're going to maybe see different hills of garbage. You'll see sewer, you'll see garbage in the sewer. You'll see animals eating in the sewer. So it wasn't a pretty place. You'll see river channels, that water coming from the mountains down into going to the sea, that are channeled through the city. They're full of garbage. And because of that, hopefully this film will show you what life was like for these people after embargo took place. Now, to give you an idea of what was going on in this garbage, when I first got there, I had to exchange money. All right? And that money aspect was a Haitian good. And the Haitian good was worth, at that time, because the money was propped up by the UN and it wasn't at full scale, but at that time, for every dollar I had, I would get 17 Haitian good. And you have to realize that was a good thing for the economy of Haiti, but the Haitian people needed to survive too, and they were living on 50 cents a day, maybe less. They might not have been living on anything. And so the population of Haiti came up with their own idea, because the Haitian good was a new dollar. They used their old dollars that they called the Haitian dollar. So every time somebody, the poor people that would come into their stores, would pay the clerks in Haitian dollars. But if they seen a rich person or an American or somebody from the UN or some dignitary come into their store, they would charge the price as a Haitian good. So it was kind of a two-way street, but the poor had a way to survive a little bit, and they still had money that came into the country to help prop up that aspect of things. Now, being that the case, you can understand if somebody's making a whole 50 cents a day, that's about $150 if they work every day of the year. And some were making less or nothing. The population aspect of Haiti at that time, the 2.5 million people in the city of Port O Prince, you have to realize because of the embargo, 99% of those people were unemployed. And because of the system that was in place to keep the people uneducated so they could control them, the governments at those times, previous governments, basically only 5% of the population was even educated. So can you imagine as yourself sitting here in wherever you're living, where only 5% of the people even have any type of education that can read and write? If it wasn't for Christian organizations and different organizations, there would be no education in Haiti. So that's one thing that needs to hopefully improve along the way. And because there's uneducated, another way they helped control it was they didn't want a Christian society. The Duval regime that was previous to the embargo didn't want Christian ethics into there. So their national religion was voodoo, and which meant that there was witches and ghosts and goblins and everything else, and that's how the people did it. So if you wanted to control somebody, you'd say, I'm going to put a hex on you, and they were scared that it would happen. So people got controlled. And so we're coming into a place where we embargoed a country where everything that they made was shut down. All the factories, everything. There was nothing left. They shut the whole country down. And the people that were basically had money in the country were those entities that were allowed to come in from around the world that were criminals, that wouldn't be extradited out of the country. So they brought in with them their hotels. They brought into them their German restaurants, their French restaurants, their Italian restaurants, their Japanese restaurants, and it was all from criminal organizations. So they'd build these huge mansions and put walls around them. And this is how these people treated Haiti. They didn't put their garbage in a garbage thing, dump, and have it taken away. They would just have their servants dump it on the other side of the wall and let somebody else take care of it. So everything in Haiti was garbage. And you'll see this in the film. Now, besides garbage in the country, they also had Haitian National Police. Now, this is a bad picture, but you can see this Haitian police officer is not armed. Might be, and they don't even have a baton. Some of them do, but most of them don't. And the reason for that is because of the death squads that were in Haiti. The death squads that were in Haiti, they were police officers. And they were not police officers. They would come to houses and arrest people, and you'd never see them again. And they were armed to the hilt. So in order for the UN to get the mass population to trust in the national police, they unarmed them all. And they fired everybody, brought in new people, and trained them unarmed. And during the time I was there, any military personnel that carried arms was considered a support officer to any Haitian police officer and a policeman themselves. So if we seen something going on, we had to take care of it. So as a combat medic, I carried a locked and loaded 9mm Beretta. And that was on me at all times. I was the #1 vehicle in the UN motor pool because I was the ambulance. And even if the general got hurt, the ambulance had to get to him. So I was the #1 vehicle. But any time I was off compound, I had a sergeant escort that had a M16A1 a rifle that escorted me anywhere that was also locked and loaded for the mass or anything that we'd have problems with, or anybody that was a criminal element that wanted to shoot us, basically. So it wasn't a great place to be. So the UN and everybody, that effect, we had to build up the police and themselves. But I did say 5% of the people were educated. That's because the Christian organizations would come in and set up schools. And during those schools, they'd have children that were considered, they had to be in certain dress codes. And whatever Christian organization that came in to do that, they would have different dress codes for those schools. But I hope you can see that these girls are in dresses right here, socks, shoes, and they have little backpacks on. And they were the lucky ones. And the nice thing was, the more kids that we had going to school, the Christian organizations, once we ended the embargo, were able to come in a lot easier. More kids were getting educated, and but they had to be lucky because they had to have somebody that would help pay for their tuition. Hopefully it was a sponsor from the United States. Hopefully it was somebody sponsoring them from around the world, or they didn't get educated. It costs money. So that's the basic start of the education system. Was one of the effects, no education to where we could start an education. The other aspect that I want to really go over here, what you're going to see in the film, is the drinking water aspect. Here you're going to see two children filling up these buckets. You'd think that would be to maybe just because they're playing next to mom, because mom's doing her laundry right there. And you're going to see in this film, maybe you can pick it out when you see in this film, what actual kind of water that is when they're filling these up. As a medic working for the United States Army, I had to carry my own water anywhere I went, because that would be the water I would be drinking if it wasn't for that. And this is what these people drink every day. And that's what happens when mass population has nothing and everything is breaking down. And you'll see on this that the posture of these people are fantastic, because you'll see ladies and men carrying things on their head. And I'll tell you, if the United States was a country where we had people that would put a little towel on top of their head and then carry everything on their head, our posture would probably be great. I seen the older women, older men, they didn't have any problems with their back, it didn't seem like, because their posture was fantastic, and because of the hard work they did all the time. Their life expectancy, of course, wasn't as great, but their postures were fantastic. Their bone structure was fantastic. They were very beautiful people, walked elegantly, and did things that had to be done. People who walk around eating sugar cane because they could get that out of the field. That was one of the staple. Bad thing about sugar cane, if you walk around and eat it all the time, your teeth are going to fall out because you're eating sugar all the time. And you'll see the bad aspect of things for people. But what we're going to do now is we're going to get into that film I edited, and I want you to look at this film and take in the aspect that this is one day that I filmed for probably 10 hours, and I edited it down to 1 hour and 15 minutes. And yes, some of the language may not be perfect in there. You may see some things you think, wonder about it. But try to take in the mass. Try to imagine that you would live like this and how you would live if you were one of them that I'm filming today. So enjoy the movie, and I think we'll have a great time. And we'll tie it up at the end of today's session, and then I'll go into tomorrow's, and then we'll tie it in at the end of tomorrow's session.
From the UN Ambulancia, we're about to go see the wonderful Port O Prince Haiti and videotape it in its finest. Here we go. Okay, this is leaving the wonderful Ibolele Hotel. This is the fine scenery that we get to look at every day. This is one of the first trash heaps we come across.
Yeah, make sure you get the other side. You look down in this side over there.
And as you can see, if you screw up and go off the road here, you're in a world of hurt. And you have 2 good chances of messing up. See, the other side's got a tremendous ditch on it. And as you can see, this ditch over here.
And the garbage.
And the garbage. Some of the scenery here. It's only about 7 o'clock in the morning, so things are still kind of dark. Okay, here's some of the maneuvering we have to do every day. Jockey down this little street here.
And the people coming up the hill. Ladies with everything on their heads, if you can see. Everything.
What's really fun is we have 2 or 3 people trying to get up the same, or the other side of the road.
Then we get our first sidewalk vendor. As soon as we come down the hill.
Shoe shine.
That's how people make their living. There's a food vendor.
And as you can tell, the roads here are just wonderful. It gets better than this. There's the first bathtub size hole. The crowds are kind of thin this morning, but have no fear. Wow. Okay, this is coming up to Del Mas, the main street in town.
It's a slow day, but
Yeah, normally traffic is a lot worse than this. Not enough people here, but
it's morning. Still early.
and you notice it's a very busy intersection. No traffic lights, no stop signs, no rules.
Just meld with the traffic.
As the day gets on, you'll see more and more people.
It's only 7 o'clock.
None of these people have a job. All they do for a living is walk up and down the street.
Except for the school kids, they're going to school in their uniforms. That's how they ride in tap-taps. Standing in the back end, waiting for an accident to happen. It's one of the milder tap-taps.
Yeah, the standard joke here is how many Haitians can you fit into one truck?
One tap-tap. How many Haitians can you fit in a tap-tap stand?
One more. That's the answer. One more. Always one more.
You missed the big tap-tap, didn't you?
There's a broken down vehicle. My prediction is we'll see about 5 on the way down the hill.
And as we go down the hill, it just gets more smog and more smog.
Okay, it's been about 10 minutes since I just turned it off last time, and you can see the crowds are thickening already.
And that school bus is just another tap-tap. They don't have school buses here. Whoever donated school buses didn't realize that the people would just turn around and make it into big taxi cabs. beat the pig eating out of it. Did you miss that, Stan?
Missed the first scarf.